Hello. And welcome to the 9th of December in 2020. And, I'm sure you're here today to learn about the remainder of the Subterranean Steampunk campaign, A Brief Recess Beneath the Rubble. Now, I said yesterday that this would be that I had heavily taken inspiration from literature. And I think that would become especially apparent in this episode as I go over the rest of the campaign. And just as before, there are a few sessions that I had actually written out in more detail what had happened, but then I got out of that habit soon after that. So I'll read my personal notes from some of those sessions, but then explain what I remember from the other ones. There's a lot of fun stuff there. So, last time we finished with the sort of escapade, which I called a Trixie in Time, using that sort of time-traveling dungeon that I found for free somewhere, I think, on Drive-Thru RPG or DM's Guild. I think DM's Guild, an online Dungeons and Dragons, like, basically book or PDF store, which is connected also with Drive-Thru RPG, which has books and PDFs and whatever for other games besides Dungeons and Dragons. But in any case, with DM's Guild being specific to Dungeons and Dragons. Excuse me. So yeah, Chapter 3 is called The Drow and Their Fury, which is, that title is inspired by the book title, The Sound and the Fury. Never read that book. I don't know anything about the plot of that book, I'll admit. So I just used the title for that in that particular instance. But anyway, Chapter 3, The Drow and Their Fury. After our heroes enjoyed a nice long rest under the wing of the good crystalline dragon, they were led to the annoying pest mentioned earlier. Farther down the river, for that is what caused this chasm between the two cities, was another cave. Normally a fully grown dragon would cleanse such a cave with a breath weapon, but, as it happened, the tunnels in this cave had enough kinks and turns in it as to render that method ineffective. Hence the temporary employment of our heroes. There were mechanical sounds coming from the cave, and as the heroes cautiously stepped forward, they discovered a small clockwork dragon. I say small, which for dragons means that it was about as tall as an average human, so probably about 5-ish feet tall, or a couple meters tall. The battle commenced, and it turned out to be a tough fight against this clockwork dragon. It was hard for the party to penetrate through the brass and copper plating that formed the contraption's armor, but Gregory the Great, the magician, had a brilliant idea. I should have said great idea. Anyway, in Trixie's cave, he had bottled up some inert gray ooze, and he splashed it on the clockwork dragon's neck. The corrosive ooze weakened that spot a little, which was enough for Conseil, the pugilist, to gain the upper hand in his attempts to grapple the metal beast, while Alice, the newer member, a half-vampire, fired arrows from afar. The dragon spewed tar and poisonous gas at the group, but stopped when it saw Tinks. As if on cue, the dragon began to speak, or rather, give a recorded message. A recorded message started to play within its voice box. "Look at me! I can fly! I have wings that work, and I can fly! Isn't that awesome? I'm so great because I can fly!" It was in Trixie's taunting voice. It seemed that she had hopes that Tinks would stumble upon her ingenious creation and laugh about it in her face. This encouraged, or should I say enraged, Tinks all the more to destroy the thing. Eventually, the party was victorious. The Clockwork Dragon, Trixie's annoying contraption, was no more. Tinks and Conseil salvaged a few parts and gears from the wreckage before the party approached the crystalline dragon. Upon hearing the good news that the contraption had been destroyed, the dragon flew the party up out of the chasm and within walking distance of the drow city of Perilous. The group received a rather cold and unwelcome reception from the guards at the city gate because the guards were very skeptical of outsiders. Even Gregory's amazing tricks didn't seem to persuade them. They were eventually convinced to let the group into the city when they explained that they were with Sovolus and Joynil, though it took a while for them to remember the drow diplomat's name. Remember to take notes, everyone. When they were led into the beautiful dark city of Perilous, more guards approached them to escort them to the Grand Council Room in a tall spire in the center of the city. There was another pair of guards just outside the Grand Council Room. Through the doors, the party could hear Sovolus's voice. They also heard a harsh female voice answering him. Once it was clear to the guards that the party was the group of foreign representatives, the players were let into the room where things were happening. I think I wrote that as like a reference to Hamilton, the room where it happens. The room had a cold, cruel atmosphere to it, not because of any decor or magic, but because of the glare given to Sovolus by an imposing female drow seated at the highest spot of the 3-seat podium. To her right, seated slightly lower, was a male drow, and to her left was an unusual black dragonborn. Unusual because he's perhaps the only dragonborn in Perilous, and his black scales are made of metal. His very body seemed to be made of the same black metal, and any words out of his mouth had a cold, slightly monotonous tone to it. For now, however, there was silence in the room as the players entered. The female drow looked up at them with an incredulous, seethingly icy glare. When the party was seated near Sovolus and Joynil, the female drow leader, known as the drow matriarch, spoke, and when she did, it betrayed the unique drow accent employed by the natives of Perilous. So in this, I gave the drow a cruel French accent, since Glundon and Perilous are the two cities related to London and Paris from the Charles Dickens novel, A Tale of Two Cities. So I tried to do some sort of French accent for the drow in Perilous, and a more British accent for the gnomes from Glundon. Anyway, I am to assume first of all, forgive me for this awful French accent. Not even sure if it's worthy of the name French, but anyway, I am to assume, my son, the female drow directed at Sovolus, that this is your party of representatives. Sovolus replied in the affirmative. He was just about to introduce them individually when Gregory the Great spoke first. Hi, I'm Gregory the Great, magician extraordinaire. He said this as he conjured a dove with a flourish of his hand. The dove soon disappeared in a flash of light. Silence. A cold stare. A cold glare. Sovolus started to become pale with embarrassment. The matriarch would have none of his cheap tricks. Sovolus quickly introduced the rest of the party. The matriarch and her husband, the male drow at her right, turned their attention back to Sovolus to explain that they saw no reason to expend resources and give aid to the surface people, especially when the drow were experiencing troubling issues of their own. This discussion didn't last long, however, before Gregory tried to show off again, with the vain hope that he could add some light and cheerfulness to this somber occasion. He conjured a few more spells and tricks which sent him backflipping over several rows of the audience and slamming into a wall. He even had the audacity to compliment the matriarch for her fierce beauty. The matriarch was furious. She banished Gregory from the room, asking the metal dragonborn, Aryon II, to escort, drag, him out. I'll mention here, Aryon was the black dragonborn who served Archon, the black dragon, back in Here There Be Science, Here There Be Dragons. And so Aryon was defeated by the players back then, but I decided to have Aryon come back just for fun. The players of this campaign would not have recognized this character, but it was just something I kind of decided would be fun to do, and to have an evil dragonborn character made of metal. That's, kind of cool, I thought, at the time. Once Gregory was out, the matriarch turned to the rest of the party. So, does anyone have something of substance to say? Tinks timidly raised her hand. Permitted to speak, she stood and explained how she was from Glundon and how important this crisis was to her. Remember, the crisis was the Githyanki invading the people on the surface, which could bleed into the subterrace, the Underdark area. She soon started to shed sincere tears as she sobbed her way through her speech, describing her deep concern for her people and for the surface people. For her people and for the surface people. Such a speech may not have been enough to convince the matriarch to instantly join the cause against the Githyanki on the surface, but it did pacify her rage such that she was willing to have further private discussion with her son, Sovolus, about the pressing matters at hand. In the meantime, there was one problem that the matriarch wished for our adventurers to look into. Aryon II would give further details. See, as strong as the Drow were in the city of Perilous, they had long relied on the diverse geography and vegetation surrounding their great city for protection against the untamed dangers of the Underland, or Subterranean called by the surface dwellers. Their military strength has been supported by one named Shari Zod, who runs the factory situated between the Twisted Quarry and the Lava Lake that produces the armor and arsenal of the Drow armies. The city itself was also blessed with one branch of a river running through it. The other branch runs through the Slime Marsh and the Fungal Forest to empty into the Frozen Lake and into the chasm between Perilous and Glundon. Recently, however, the river had become corrosive. The Fungal Forest was dying beneath an ever stronger layer of frost creeping closer to the city. The cries and roars of unknown monsters could be heard in the distance. Worst of all, Shahrazad had gone missing, and the factory stopped producing anything. Many Drow soldiers were sent to various areas around the city to investigate, including at the factory, but to no avail. Even more concerning was that some Drow soldiers never returned. At this time, most of the city's resources were devoted to addressing the most pressing crisis, the polluted, corrosive river, which had previously been their main source of water. Even so, the matriarch wanted some skilled adventurers to venture into the Fungal Forest to search for the cause of its slow, cold death. Arion II explained all of this to the players and gave them instructions on how to get to the forest. The more astute characters noticed that Arion's metallic breath smelled familiar. It had a strong acidic smell, similar to some acid they had encountered before. But before leaving the city to explore the forest, the players wanted to explore several shops, hoping to resupply. Their attempted transactions were met with difficulty, for the Drow merchants didn't seem to like foreigners. Furthermore, they charged exorbitant prices and always drove a hard bargain. Gregory the Great in particular was looking for magic items. He was able to get goggles of night so he could see in the dark. He also wanted to get his pocket watch, the one obtained in Trixie's cave, appraised. He almost lost the watch to the merchant, but ended up stealing it back. Despite the many setbacks in the Drow City, our heroes were soon set to embark on their mission. Little did they know the many dangers they would run into, nor the powerful figures they would encounter. So before I read the next chapter of my notes here, I want to explain sort of the map that I had in my head. So imagine a large sort of like underground space or continent, if you will, and there's a veil or a big chasm that separates one city, Glundon, from the other, Perilous. So imagine Glundon, if you look at a map and look at north, I guess. Imagine Glundon north of the chasm. Imagine Perilous south of the chasm. Along with Perilous, there are a lot of things around it. Essentially, I made what was a different elemental area. And each elemental area, like the stuff that you encounter there, was inspired by some different work of literature. So kind of like starting at the around 1 or 2 o'clock area around outside of Perilous, you have around the 1 o'clock area you have the Frozen Lake, and then beneath that you have the Fungal Forest, beneath which you have the Slime Marsh. I'm pretty sure it's a Slime Marsh, yeah. And then you have the Twisted Quarry, followed by the Lava Lake. And then there's also the factory kind of somewhere in the middle between, sort of like between the city and the Lava Lake and the Twisted Quarry. So, each of those areas, again, a different element, as well as like a different element like water, fire, and that kind of thing. Along with as I'll explain, a different work of literature that in real world literature that inspired what happens in there, which I had too much fun with each of those. But anyway, that's kind of what was happening. A rather contrived map, I'll admit, but it, again, as with everything else, it was fun. So I called Chapter 4 The Vial, the Pitch, and the Wart Probe. That title may sound familiar to you because it was meant to sound like The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. The Vial, the Pitch, and the Wart Probe. I think I also put a bit of Pokemon into this as well. As well as like Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, I think. But yeah, here we go. It was easy to find the path to the fungal forest, but it was hard to explain the dead end it led to. The party's path seemed to end in a lone cavern, empty but for a wooden closet placed at the end. So again, they found a path that led to the fungal forest, but that path led instead of leading to a forest, it led to a cave of some kind. And at the end of the cave, there was some sort of a wooden closet, or a wardrobe at the end. Conseil bravely walked to the oddly placed furniture, opened the door, and stepped into the pitch blackness. Instantly, the wardrobe came alive. It turned out to be a mimic, waiting for unsuspecting victims. The party made short work of the mimic and discovered that it was standing in front of a doorway leading to the fungal forest entrance. A little twist there. The sights beyond the doorway was beautiful and eerie. Imagine a rainforest on Earth. Replace all the trees and shrubs with fungi, and you might get the idea. There were fungi of all shapes and sizes and colors, dull and bright. There were even fungi that were as tall as trees, and their bark was actually as hard as wood. You could use it as wood. A steady green glow was coming from something further along the path to the forest. The glow belonged to a lamppost, a strangely modern sight in the midst of a wild forest of fungus. At the foot of the lamppost, however, was the body of a satyr. An awful smell was coming from the corpse, and closer inspection revealed that the body had been infested with a strange fungi. Just then, there was a burst of spores, and a gas spore, a creature in the monster manual, started to float away from the body. Its unseeing eye was directed towards our heroes. Alice decided to attack it with her arrow, a safe move under different circumstances. You see, the thing about gas spores is that they look like another creature called beholders. They have a false eye, and they look like they have eye stalks growing from them. It's really just a floating bit of fungus, and if they explode, they have like one hit point, essentially. And once they explode, they have these really dangerous spores. That's the real danger of gas spores. Gas spores are so fragile that they explode in a thick cloud of spores the moment a sharp blade or arrow punctures it. All the players except for Alice, the characters except for Alice, were able to avoid consuming any of the spores, but Alice got some of the spores stuck in her throat. She could still function, but for how long before the spores began to kill her? Then mechanical sounds could be heard nearby. All the players, understandably, were rather wary of the noise, and it turned out to be a short creature that was sort of. I took cues from the Pokemon called Paris. So imagine sort of a crab with a big mushroom on its back. It turned out to be a living machine because a hatch opened on its shell to reveal a strange needle. The creature mechanical thing stuck the needle in the arm of the deceased satyr. Then it turned to Alice and pricked her arm. Where the needle struck, a small wart appeared. The machine introduced itself as the Wart Probe, and it was obeying its programming given to it by its master, Lord Linwood. Alice realized this Lord Linwood could likely be her long-lost father. The Wart Probe led the party through the forest to a makeshift hut deep in the forest. As the players were led through the forest, they saw that the deeper they went, the more cold and ice they saw and felt. It seemed that, indeed, a mysterious frost was taking over the fungal forest. The Wart Probe and our heroes eventually made it to the hut. No one was there, but Conseil and Tinks were able to find documents, letters, and simple maps that all seemed to indicate that this Lord Linwood was in the middle of researching something. Also, one of his letters refers to my daughter Alice, and the maps indicated that Lord Linwood wanted to visit a large mansion across the frozen lake, which was neighbor to the fungal forest. All of this was discovered as the Wart Probe entered blood samples of various hues in identical vials, storing the vials for later analysis. It is not yet clear what the research is or what it is for. Conseil and Tinks wanted to explore the hut and surrounding areas some more, but Alice and Gregory decided to go visit this mysterious mansion. Alice had the feeling that this mansion was the one that belonged to her family. Perhaps it now belongs to her. And so this is the end of my notes. So I'm going to be speaking improv here based on my memories. But the next chapter I titled The Great Ghastly. The Great Ghastly. The Great Gatsby is one of my favorite works of literature. Even though it made no sense to me when I read it in high school, I've come to appreciate it because because some people that I love and admire know the book very well. We had talks about it and stuff, and all the stuff about the American Dream. There's I discovered a Great Gatsby video game on the internet, which is basically it's like an NES style video game, which is kind of fun, a platformer game, weird. And also, I really like the movie that I saw the Robert Redford film adaptation, but I prefer the Leonardo DiCaprio version of Great Gatsby. So, anyway, the Great Ghastly. Essentially, the frozen lake was this big lake that, its shores were very close to the fungal forest. So if you enter from the north side of the fungal forest, you'll reach the southern shores of the frozen lake. And on the other side of the lake was what appeared to be some sort of mansion. And so the players went across the frozen lake on a boat that was there, and they explored the mansion a bit. I included a few small cues few small things in the mansion inspired by the Great Gatsby. Most notably, a portrait that, there's a painting on a wall in one room that had just a pair of eyes, and that's it. And if they were to go in there, the pair of eyes would, shoot lasers at them, essentially. A reference to T.J. Eichelberg in the novel. But in any case, the Great Ghastly was, if I remember correctly, that's the name of a lich that they found in the attic. And the lich essentially had this sort of like tragic backstory. Like he worked with this Professor Linwood person in researching various things about vampires and liches and things like that. And even though this character was a lich and the players were nowhere near the right level to fight a lich, I didn't intend for them to fight the Great Ghastly, and they didn't. The Great Gatsby is just sort of this miserable, tragic figure who sort of wishes he could go back in time and relive certain things in his life, but he can't, and that sort of thing. So that brings us to the next chapter, The Slime Machine, which I was basing off of H.G. Wells's The Time Machine. I read that book in college. Very, very interesting early sci-fi book. Lots of crazy stuff. But essentially, this took place in an area called the Slime Marsh. As the players were going, I tried I tried lots of crazy things in this campaign. Little gimmicks and whatever. Basically, I sort of like a randomly generated dungeon that every time they turned a corner, I rolled a dice to see what they would come across next, because the slime marsh would just change all the time. They came across strange creatures having some sort of banquet or whatever, until finally they came across I think it was an Arcanoloth, some sort of fiendish, strong arcane spellcaster creature named H. Jules. So not the letter H, but Aytch or something like that was the first name, and then Jules, as in jewels on a necklace, was the last name, which is, that's like H.G. Wells, H. Jules, that kind of thing. Essentially, H. Jules had some sort of machine that needed to be repaired. H. Jules was stuck in the material plane in this area, and he wanted to get back to his to the Nine Hells where his home was. And so Tinks was able to help repair the machine to be able to take H. Jules back to the Nine Hells, essentially. The next area I titled Alice in Underland. This took place in the Twisted Quarry. The Twisted Quarry was, appropriately labyrinthine. I basically just took several random, bits from Through the Looking Glass and Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. I think I had them encounter some sort of strange cat along the way. There were, they encountered some chess pieces and stuff like that in the Twisted Quarry. And essentially, Alice in this version of Alice was an anti-paladin of some kind. She was also a sort of tragic figure that they were eventually able to defeat. She was this evil anti-paladin kind of a thing. The next one I called Flames and the Giant Creech. This was at the Lava Lake area, which also had sort of like a volcano-ish layer. The giant, so that sounds like James and the Giant Peach, right? Arguably literature. It's a children's book by Roald Dahl. I've seen the claymation, the stop motion film, of course, and I've read the book. Lots of fascinating stuff in there. I thought that would be a fun thing to use for inspiration. Essentially, the players went through some sort of volcanic lair, and I had them also encounter a bunch of like large sentient bugs as well, among other things. But there wasn't a big peach or a big piece of fruit. No, the giant creech referred to a beholder. If you don't know what a beholder is, and I just realized you might not know what a lich is either. I'll explain in a second. Hold on. Okay, so first of all, this thing right here is a beholder. This creature. It's basically a big floating sphere of badness that has one big eye in the center of its face, a big gaping maw, and 10 eye stalks. It's a classic Dungeons and Dragons creature, and they're very dangerous. They are very dangerous indeed. They can conjure like creatures in their dreams. Essentially, they can. Each of their eye stalks can shoot some sort of like eye ray or something like that. This is the beholder right here. That skull thing on the other side is what an undead beholder looks like. But yeah, all kinds of like, eye rays, like petrification ray, slow ray, death ray, disintegration ray, telekinetic ray, all kinds of stuff. They're just these egotistical tyrants. Actually, I imagine Lord Vrax, the character from Brawlhalla, the one-eyed character from Brawlhalla, is probably very much equally egotistical and tyrannical as just like a beholder. If you were in Dungeons and Dragons, and you could choose any creature to be Lord Vrax, I would choose a beholder, bar none. That is the perfect fit for Lord Vrax. Now, what is a lich? I'll go back a little bit. A lich is essentially a powerful undead wizard. A wizard who wanted to transcend their mortality into immortality and continue delving into dark, arcane secrets and lore. If I can just find the page here, there are a couple of images in the monster manual. Liches are bad news. They tend to be more powerful than beholders, actually. So here's a good picture of a lich right there. And actually, there's another really good picture. Another really good picture on the Dungeon Master's Guide. This is a rather well-known lich in Dungeons and Dragons lore named Acerak. So he's the one who built the infamous and deadly Tomb of Horrors that became infamously deadly. So there's that. Anyway, Flames and the Giant Creech. So the party eventually goes through the volcanic layer up and finally run into Creech, and I had some sort of rhyme or something like that. It's written down somewhere. Like Creech would say something like, I see your doom, the giant Creech before you looms, or something, stuff like that. And actually, I made this beholder a vampiric beholder. I gave him some vampiric qualities. And that's also where they ran into Alice Linwood's father as well, who was doing experimentations with vampirism and stuff like that, with the Great Creech. And Alice Linwood, played by my then girlfriend Blaze, was her character Alice Linwood was not impressed by, or maybe we were married by that point, I don't know, and she was not impressed by what her father was doing. And they sort of moved on after defeating the giant Creech. So all the problems that Perilous was worried about, they essentially, there were just a bunch of big baddies all over the place trying to exact their own wills. But there was one major plot that the players were finally going to come up on in the sort of next chapter, which I called Aluminium Whites or Aluminum Whites. That now I based this off of Arabian Nights or the Tales of 1001 Nights. The whole Scheherazade thing. I'm especially proud of this. I would love to try something kind of like this again. Essentially, this was where the players were finally going to the factory to try to figure. They finally reached the factory to try to figure out what the heck is happening there. The factory that was supplying Perilous, the Drow military in Perilous, all their weapons and armor and everything. I need to grab another book off to the side here. Sorry, because there's an image that a few images that I want to be able to show you to give you a good idea of what was encountered there. So. The characters break into the factory and they finally meet Shahrazad, which, obviously the name is inspired by Scheherazade, the one who, avoided death for 1001 consecutive days by, spinning a tale, by continuing to spin a tale that her husband, the king, who wanted to kill her, was enraptured by it. So she kept going on and on in this tale, putting one story inside another one, inside another one, inside another one to keep it going for, 1001 evenings. So, what did I do with in the Dungeons and Dragons setting? I effectively put a game within a game, within a game, within a game, within a game. It was maybe there are probably some ways that I could have done it better, but I'd love to try to experiment with this kind of thing a bit more to see how crazy one could go with it. But first, I should explain. Shahrazad was a mind flayer or an illithid. Here is one image of a mind flayer. This big thing right up here, and then. The monster manual, as always, has a great image of what a mind flayer looks like. As the name suggests, so mind flayer, it's this squid kind of like creature right here. As the name suggests, mind flayer, also known as illithids, as I said, they flay minds. They actually subsist on brains. And so they use psionic energy to overwhelm and stun their opponents. And if they capture somebody, they use their tentacles to like grab them and eat their brains essentially, eat their minds. Also, mind flayers are created by inserting a tadpole inside someone's brain, and then that tadpole consumes the brain and replaces the brain essentially, and then that person becomes a mind flayer themselves. And there are all kinds of crazy things as well, like mind flayers converting beholders to their cause. There's like a mother brain and all that stuff. Mind flayers are really, really nasty, conniving creatures, and they're incredibly intelligent too. And so that's what Shahrazad was, a solitary mind flayer doing his own thing. Now, this chapter was called Aluminium Whites. You can also say aluminum whites if you want. I'm used to saying aluminum, the metal. But I don't know. I guess I thought aluminium sounded cooler, not for next to the whites or whatever. Yeah, whites are undead soldiers, essentially, in the simplified version. And Shahrazad had an army of aluminium whites, basically, that was dormant in his factory and he was going to unleash. And he said that he has been creating this army to go against Perilous. Now, when the players came across Shahrazad at first, they didn't fight him at first. Shahrazad said, why don't we play a little game? And actually, one thing I tried to do, so mind flayers have their own language, which is called Qualish, but they can also speak telepathically. Qualish is a language that almost no one except mind flayers know. So speaking telepathically is kind of how they communicate with other species, essentially. Or their lunch, I suppose, whatever. So I tried something like so I can do an echo effect with my voice. Hi, my name is Baron. What yours. It uses some ventriloquistic techniques. Hi. What your name. Basically, I'm using what ventriloquists do to kind of talk talk as much as possible without moving your lips as much. And so I thought that, someone speaking telepathically would look like that. So every time I had Charizard speak, I essentially tried to do something like this, where I did not move my lips. I had Charizard I tried to do this sort of a thing to simulate telepathic communication. I was probably slightly successful. I don't know. I would have to. I'm not a ventriloquist, but I have the echo effect pretty much down. But yeah. So that's what I did. Charizard had created a game called Giants and Dragons, and so he invited the characters, our heroes, to play a session of Giants and Dragons, just for fun. Charizard was still evil, but he wanted people to try this game that he had made, and so the characters sat around a table with Charizard as the dungeon mat, the sort of like giant dragon game master, whatever. Don't know if I had a word for that, but in any case, so that in and of itself, the players, like my players, were playing as characters who were playing a game called Giants and Dragons. That is already a game within a game. All right. So within the simplistic plot of that session of Giants and Dragons, the characters in that game were going up against a fire giant, a lord of the fire giants. I kind of used some inspiration from the fire giant king from my first Steampunk campaign. But yeah, so they went against. So they find the characters in that game in Giants and Dragons, find the fire giant, and the fire giant talks to them. And every time I spoke as Charizard, playing as a character like the fire giant, I still did something like this, except Charizard was making some kind of voice to pretend that he is the fire giant king or something like that. And the fire giant king offered the characters in that game, instead of fighting, let's try to play a little game. This time it was essentially chess. All right. And then I had some like special rules for how you could move and things like that. And and so the players were playing this chess-like game with the characters are playing this game this chess-like game against the fire giant. So that the chess game within Giants and Dragons is a game within a game within a game. And then let's see. Yeah, game within a game within a game. I thought I had 5 layers. I tried to do like 5 layers if possible. I think I may have only managed 4. I'm not sure. I'd like to maybe I'll try 5 next time I try something like this. But one of the rules of this chess game was that if 2 pieces clash, like if one piece runs into another, then a little mini game needs to be played to kind of determine which piece is removed from the board. And for that, I found a little mobile game that essentially lets 2 people play a sort of like pinball-esque game on the same mobile device. So you just kind of like lay there are a few games out there like this, on like Google Play or whatever. You lay the phone on a table or you like hold it between yourselves, and you each have one side, and you're playing this little sort of like pinball-ish game, or maybe like Pong type game or whatever. And the winner of that would win the little chess-like clash, and the losing piece would be removed. And the winner of the chess game would be the ones with the last pieces remaining, essentially. So that is a game, the little mobile game within the game of kind of chess within Giants and Dragons within Dungeons and Dragons. So a game within a game within a game within a game. Game within a game within a game within a game. Just like the Scheherazade method of a tale within a tale within a tale within a tale. In the Tale of 1001 Nights. I was pretty proud of how I did that. Probably could have done it a little bit better. It was rather contrived, I'll admit. But I thought it was cool. The players seemed to enjoy it as well. And so, once the chess game thing was done, then that, they resolved the Giants and Dragons game. And now we were back to just straight up Dungeons and Dragons. And they fought Charizard himself after that. Which was a hard battle. Charizard did all kinds of tricks to try to avoid escape or avoid getting killed. Eventually, and Charizard also ran away from the battle, and they raced him back to Perilous to try to report him to the Grand Council in Perilous. And when they arrived back at Perilous, they ran into Aryan II, the metallic black dragon. And Aryan was explaining that Charizard actually worked for him. And he, Aryan II, worked for the god of tyranny, Asmodeus. And what Asmodeus wanted, I was inspired by Thanos for this. Asmodeus wanted the affection of Tiamat, the evil five-headed dragon queen, essentially. And of course, the final battle essentially was the players beating Aryan II. Actually, that wasn't the final thing, but that was one major climactic thing. And then, so that garnered the appreciation of the city of Perilous, and so the Drow matriarch allowed some of the Drow military to go back up to the surface to help out the people on the surface against the Githyanki warriors. And the characters go up the capital mountain, and they find no Githyanki anywhere. They had abandoned the place, and they found Charizard there once again. And the hilarious thing that happened was, instead of beating him outright at first, Gregory the Great polymorphed him into a squid. And polymorph is a concentration spell. You have to stay focused on that spell in order for it to keep working. Otherwise, the spell will break, and Charizard will be back into his powerful mind player self. So basically, the player who's playing Gregory the Great, who's oh yeah, Gregory's going squid, 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 to keep Charizard trapped in that useless squid form. Charizard was apprehended, and always right with and basically Charizard, along with serving Aryan II as well as Aryan II as well as Asmodeus, was the Githyanki are mortal enemies to the Mind Flayers. These Githyanki alien warriors used to be slaves to the Mind Flayers, so they've liberated themselves a long time ago, and so any Mind Flayers they see, they try to kill on sight. And so, yeah, the Githyanki were basically trying to search for Charizard, and Charizard was dealt with. And yeah, that was pretty much the end of the campaign. I probably talked a lot, didn't I? Yeah, about almost 45 minutes. So, I was hoping that cutting this into 2 parts would, make it shorter. I guess another longer episode. I hope you enjoyed it. I tried not to be too wordy or lengthy or anything like that. But yeah. That is the story of A Brief Recess Beneath the Rubble, my second steampunk campaign. My second campaign set in that sort of steampunk world, using all kinds of, literature, stuff like that. Lots of fun, indeed. So, yeah. I appreciate you all being here to listen. Thanks for coming. Thank you for being here, and I'll see you tomorrow. All the best.